Welcome to Patty's Aquatics. Now today what I'd like to do is do a tour of my dirted, filterless fish room. I last did a tour about 5-6 months ago, but so much has changed since then. I've redid just about every tank down here in some way or fashion. So what I would like to do is kind of go over every single tank, show you the progress, tell you what I got in store, and just hopefully share the passion that I have for this hobby through my tanks to you guys right now. So if you're ready, let's start back here. So what I'm going to do is show you a clip of what my tank looked like before, last time you seen it in a video, and then what it looks like now. This is my 29-gallon pink Endler and blue dream shrimp tank. The last time you seen it, it was in changing the cap of a dirted tank. What I did, if you didn't see it, is I removed gravel as the cap of my dirted tank, scraped as much out of as I could, and I replaced it with sand. And oh my, as you can see, these plants have just absolutely grown in since then. The dorsage and the little wigia. Other plants in this tank that I have are moneywort. I have a nubius, and I have a cryptocorn, I believe it's wendenti. And then there's also some guppy grass that made its way into this tank, and it tries to take over. I have to remove it like probably once every month, otherwise it gets so thick in there. But this tank is doing awesome. The fish are just great. I love this Endler strain, this pink Endler, the look of it, the color strain. It just really drew it to me when I first found them to want to buy them. And they've been breeding proficiently like any type of livebearer. And I've really been happy with the way this tank has turned out since I changed that scape. I had such a stagnant plant growth in here with the gravel cap. And then once I put that sand in there, it just, boom, it just took off the last few months. So very pleasantly surprised. This is my 29-gallon pink Endler tank with my blue dream shrimp. Now this is my 29-gallon with my breeding pair of silver veil angels, and this is what it looked like before, and this is what it looks like now. This tank, if you remember, used to house my African shell dwellers, but then I got this breeding pair of silver veil angels, and been trying to get them to breed a few times here. They keep laying their eggs on the branches of my scape, so that's why if you notice these little black coasters everywhere, I've been trying to get them to lay on their eggs, so that way I can remove them from the tank. Plants-wise, it hasn't grown in profusely in this tank, but I'm okay with that because I like the swimming room up front for the fish. But the plants have been growing very well for what is in there. The only downfall of this tank so far has been the collection of algae on the sand. If you're familiar with my channel, I like the natural look, so algae really does not bother me at all if they're in my tanks. It's kind of part of a natural ecosystem in my opinion. It's a little bit of an eyesore once in a while, but back to the fish, these things breed non-stop. I swear it's like every 6 or 7 days they lay a new clutch of eggs somewhere. And my goal has always been to try to get them on those coasters so that I can get them out and try to breed them. The last time you saw this tank, it was in my video, how to create a natural dirted aquarium. Now, as you can see, it has grown in quite a bit since then. This tank houses my high-fin blue coral varieties and a bunch of cherry shrimp. Now, this tank, before I rescaped it, was a sand substrate with dorsage and had just a bunch of guppy grass. And these fish really bred in here very proficiently, but I wanted to change everything over to a dirted tank, and this was the results, and I'm very pleased with it. Now, as you can see, some of that algae that was in that past tank still kind of takes hold a little bit there near the bottom and the back, but I'm okay with that because this tank also, if you're familiar with one of my past videos, my journey with the Father Fish Resurrection Jar, I poured my resurrection jar into this tank. Now, I haven't kept up with putting leaf litter at the bottom for the little microorganisms in there for the fish to feed on, but I feel like that algae and everything that collects down into that back area is a pretty sufficient source of food for those as well, because I still do see little organisms swimming around once in a while in this tank. So there are things still thriving in here from that resurrection jar. And I'm very pleased with the way that this tank has turned out and how much the plants have really grown in. And this is honestly one of my favorite tanks down here in my fish room. And if you're not familiar with my channel, I really thrive to have a natural looking tank, and this one really hits the mark with that. Now this is what this tank looked like a couple months ago, and this is what it looks like now. Plants have really grown in, and if you want to go back to the history of this tank, it originally housed these guppies that I had, and then I switched it over to a native crayfish tank, which was the plan for this tank until those koi angels I have in here that I had bought at a swap meet decided to eat my baby guppy and endlers that I had in another tank. So then I had to turn this tank into a dirty tank and switch it over for these angels, and it has become another breeding project for me in here. So if you saw a past video, I went and got more angels in here to try to get a breeding pair or two out of these. As far as those crayfish I talked about before, I'll show you a little later on in this video what happened to those. But the plants in here have been booming. The Pogostem installatus octopus, the dwarf sage, Ludwigia, and my favorite red tiger lotus that I have in here. Now back to the fish, like I said, I'm really trying to get a couple of these to pair off. I preferably would love to get one of my original koi angels to pair off with one of those black and white red-eyed marbled ones. I think the fry would look pretty phenomenal out of those. So that's the whole point of this tank, is to try to get a pair or two to pair off, and then I'll try to figure out where to put the rest of them. And this has been my latest fascination down in my fish room, is trying to breed angels with the other tank with my silver veils and then trying to match up pairs here. Find it very interesting. Now this is my 20 long, and this is what it looked like last you seen it when it was in my video, the changing the cap of a dirty tank. And this is what it looks like now. Now this is the first dirty tank that I ever set up. It started with the gravel cap like I indicated before. And if you go back and watch that video of changing my cap, I explain why I removed the gravel and put sand in there. It just, the dirt was working its way up, and that the gravel just kind of seemed to collect the pockets of poop and grossness that would just sit in there, and I wanted to remove it, so I did. And I'm glad I did, because I really like the look of the sand and how it turned out. Now this tank houses my orange and green Taiwanese double sword guppies. It's a very cool strain of fish. I'm pretty sure it's a mix of some type of Endler and guppy, but it's classified as a guppy. But the look of them are really cool, and I really enjoy watching them swim around within all this really thick forest of dwarf sage. Now also in here is I have a bunch of cherry shrimp. Those are the main inhabitants, but plant-wise, like I said, lots of dwarf sage. And these cool cryptocorns, I don't remember which kind they are. I bought a few of them a few years ago and kind of got them mixed through the tank, and I don't know which is which anymore, to be honest with you. Now the dwarf sage grows in this tank so fast, I have to trim them down probably at least every 2 weeks if I want it to look like this. And I try to bring it down at least a couple inches under the surface. Otherwise, I could be trimming it weekly. That's how fast they grow. Well, that was my 20-gallon long. This is my 10-gallon tank, and I believe this is the only one that has not changed in my fish room. It still houses my daughter's beta, and this is a shared tank with her and I. She puts her decorations in there and feeds her beta every day, and then I put this little guppy breeding project in there. It's some of those Taiwanese orange and green double sword guppies that you've seen in the last tank, and then I also had it was a mixed orange guppy that I had from a local fish store in the past. I put a male of those other Taiwanese guppies in here and 2 females of these other ones in, and been breeding them. And this has kind of been the results. I find a lot of these fishes are starting to grow up to look really cool. So I'm kind of curious to see how they continue to grow and look like as they get bigger and continue to breed within each other. There are also a boatload of cherry shrimp in here as well, on top of all these guppies, and the beta that's right back there, if you can see it hiding on top of the heater. And also, like all my other tanks, this is a dirted tank as well. This was actually one of the first sand cap tanks that I put together when I started this whole journey of these dirted tanks, probably a little over 2 years ago. And this is my 20 high, what it looked like last when you seen it. And this is what it looks like now. This was in my video, 2 aquascapes in one video with this tank and the next one you're about to see. Now this tank houses my koi swordtails, and there's a bunch of cherry shrimp in here as well. The swordtails have been starting to breed finally. I had a few females that were very pregnant, and I found a few babies swimming around now, probably at least 6 to 10 range. It's hard to tell for sure because of the plants and the scape in here. This Ludwigia that I put in here, which was the main plant that I used to plant this tank, has really taken off, and it's become quite the forest, which is perfect for breeding with these live bearers, with these swordtails, because it gives those fry somewhere to hide and be protected from them from getting eaten. And that was always the issue I had with these guys when I had them previously in another tank. When I first got them, I would have really a hard time for them to keep the young because they would eat them all the time. So this is one way for me to kind of counteract that, to try to get some of these fish to be able to survive and breed and get more of a bigger colony of them. But I love this tank. This is probably my top 3 down in my fish room with the look of this Ludwigia everywhere. I just find that very cool, and is right up the line, again, of mine of loving those natural looking tanks. Now, some other plants that I do have in this tank are some cryptocorn. I have a Nubius, and then I have some guppy grass over on that left side that really wants to try to take over here and there, but I got to remove once in a while. But yeah, this is my 20-gallon high, and like I said, it's one of my favorites. I really love this look, and I hope you like it too. Now, this is my Hexagon tank that also was in my 2 Aquascapes 1 video, and this is what it looks like now. The plants have really grown in on this one, and then the fish in this one is from my summer tubs, all the fish that had grown and bred out there that I put in here, a mix of guppies and endlers. And there's a bunch of cherry shrimp in here as well. This tank also, I put sand on top of my gravel cap I had in here. This originally was a gravel cap dirted tank, and my plants were not growing at all, like nothing. The dorsage that I had in here in the back of the tank sat at the same size for well over a year and never grew. Once I put the sand cap in here and put these other plants in here, the plants have just taken off. And I'm very pleased with the amount of growth that these plants have had over the last couple months. Now, fish-wise, like I said, they came from my summer tubs, and I am just loving this tank to be able to look at it and just see all the different variations of colors and tails and finnage of everything that's different from all these different fish that are breeding together. I find that fascinating, and hoping to find a couple really cool ones, more than I've already seen in here. And I actually find myself looking at this tank more than the others, just trying to find a new variation of guppy or endler that might be in there. And then let's move on to my little desk area that houses my 2 little nano tanks. One of them has changed quite drastically. The other one stayed the same. This is what they used to look like when I scaped them from my free aquarium setup video. And then this is what's happening now. I'm currently using that small 2.5-gallon tank as my new little breeder tank for my angelfish to try to get the eggs to hatch. The other container I had, if you watched my last video with hatching the angelfish, I really didn't like it, so I moved on to this one. I just didn't have a lot of space in order to put other containers or tanks up just to try to raise the fry for right now until I can find some success within it. So that's what I've done with this one. But moving on is the little fishbowl here. Now this one hasn't changed. I haven't done any water changes on it since I made this little container. There's mostly just shrimp in there and snails. It's really hard to see in it a lot of times because of the lighting, and I think I'm going to be doing another standalone video kind of de-weeding that one and try to take a closer look to see what's in there, because it's kind of interesting in my opinion. I like to take more of a deep dive into it, but that's the fishbowl. But now, I told you earlier that I wanted to tell you about those crayfish and where they might be. Well, I got them in here in a tote underneath the table. Now, I could have just fed them to my Fajaca puffer, but the whole purpose of getting them was to kind of observe them and just kind of see how they interact. And also, like I said, the main purpose of them was to try to get them to breed. Because if I can get them to breed, that's a free food source for me for my Fajaca puffer. There's probably like 6 to 8 of them in here, so that is the plan. I'll see what happens over the winter here and into the spring, and we'll go from there. This is my 100-gallon little mini indoor pond. houses 2 goldfish. I used to have a koi, if you've seen a past video, that I rehomed, and a couple of bigger goldfish that wound up passing. But I have 2 small goldfish. I have a few Guppy and Endler mixes. I have some albino bristlenose plecos in here that I've had for quite a while. I'm hoping that I can maybe start to breed now, but I'm not sure if I have a male. I know I have a couple females. A few Corridora that I had from years ago, and then I started to plant this tub with Amazon sort, as you can see there, a bunch of Ludwigia and Dorsades that were left over from my summer tubs, and then the pond lilies that are in there now for my summer tubs. So I'm hoping to get this to be a nice, thick, heavily planted tub, and to get those guppies and endlers to kind of really reproduce in here. That's the main goal of it. And I plan to get my red root floaters to really start growing in here heavily too for a future swap meet in February that I want to sell them at. Well, that was my filterless dirted fish room. I hope you enjoyed it. I love coming down here every day, whether it's just to look at the fish, feed the fish, do maintenance, tinker with whatever. This is my escape. So I hope you enjoyed seeing everything down here as much as I love being down here myself. That being said, please consider hitting that subscribe button if you like this type of content. Make sure you hit that notification bell. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time here at Patty's Aquatics.